I heard my name before I even touched the handle of the glass door. Evie's team just got lucky. That's all this is. The voice, smooth, performative, like it was used to being agreed with, slid out into the hallway like a snake. I froze. My pulse thrummed in my ears. The manila folder in my hands, stuffed with weeks of work and late-night edits, felt like it had tripled in weight. He wasn't whispering. That was the part that stunned me. He wasn't even trying to hide it. She pulled off the Helix deal, sure, he went on. But let's be honest, she's a mid-tier manager from community college. We can't risk the company's future on that. David Sinclair, Stanford MBA tailored to hell suit, a jawline that probably had its own skincare routine. Our freshly imported chief growth officer. He'd been here for 6 weeks. 6! And he already sounded like he owned the building. I closed my eyes, steadying myself. Deep breath in. The air in my chest sat heavy, like Texas humidity before a thunderstorm. I opened the door. They both turned. David first, his expression caught between surprise and that fake corporate smirk he'd clearly practiced. Then James Whitaker, our CEO, whose blue blood ran so deep he probably thought middle management was a myth. His smile faltered for half a second when he saw me, then returned like a button had been pressed. Evie, James said, smoothing his tie, like we hadn't just walked in on his internal decapitation plans. Perfect timing. Great news, David added too fast. We were just discussing your $85 million deal with Summit Line Logistics. Quite impressive. I gave a neutral nod, took the seat across from them, and placed my folder neatly on the dark walnut table. Thank you, I said. The signed documents will be on your desk Monday morning. James leaned forward. That's actually why we asked you here. Something in his tone made the back of my neck tighten. Not the words, but the way he said them. Like someone breaking off a date over salad. First of all, he went on, hands folded in front of him like a pastor before a sermon. Congratulations. You've landed the largest contract in Novus's history. I nodded again. Appreciate that. David jumped in, flashing teeth. And it's helped clarify something important about the kind of clients we want to pursue going forward, enterprise-level global partnerships. That scale demands leadership with a certain pedigree. Pedigree. He really said it, like I was some mutt they found running around in the supply yard. We've decided to dissolve the Strategic Development Department, James said. Just like that. Like a magician pulling a sword through the middle of my career. I blinked once. You're dissolving my department. You've done excellent groundwork, David said, like he was handing out a participation trophy. But in order to elevate the brand to Fortune class, we need leaders with Ivy League experience, global consulting backgrounds. That level. I sat there, perfectly still, my spine straight, my heels planted, and my face unreadable. What they didn't know was that I'd practiced this moment, not this exact betrayal, but the moment when someone decided my background wasn't enough. I'd felt it 1,000 times before, in boardrooms, in supply docks, even in line at PTA meetings. That condescending glance, that smile too tight, that resume once over when they saw Austin Community College at the top. 6 years. 6 years I had bled for this company. Traveling while Mia had strep throat. Working holiday weekends while my neighbors grilled hot dogs. Showing up to client warehouses in steel-toe boots because no one else wanted to crawl through logistics software failures in person. And now, a polite goodbye for the woman who just brought in $85 million. I looked James square in the eye. So this is the thank you. He shifted in his seat. It's not personal, Evie. It's strategy. I gave him a tight smile. Of course. I appreciate the clarity. David looked almost disappointed I didn't cry. I shook James's hand, steady and firm. Wishing you both continued success. They didn't know what I knew. Marcia Hastings, Summit Line's CEO. The one who'd personally signed off on the deal wasn't just a client. She was a friend. And more importantly, she was a woman who couldn't care less where I went to school. She cared that when her distribution system crashed mid-holiday season, I'd been the only one to show up at 4 a.m. with coffee for her ops crew. That I sat with her night shift to unravel a $20 million shipping breakdown no one else could figure out. No PowerPoint, no jargon, just results. I left the building with my head high. My phone buzzed the second I hit the sidewalk. A message from Marcia. See you Monday, drinks after. I smiled, typed back, wouldn't miss it. Inside, I could still hear David's voice. We want leaders with pedigree. Let them have their pedigree. Let them reorganize and rebrand and rehearse their talking points. Because come Monday, when Summit Line walked into that boardroom and didn't see me, They'd finally understand what happens when you bet on polish over performance. And I couldn't wait. Monday, 8:57 a.m. The sun was already beating down on East Austin as I slid into a window seat at Indigo Bean Cafe, a tiny spot wedged between a bike shop and a bakery that smelled like cinnamon dreams. I'd ordered my usual, a cold brew splash of oat milk, and opened my laptop, pretending to review notes while my stomach churned like it knew something was coming. I wasn't in Novus's conference room. I wasn't even on company time, but I knew exactly what was about to happen downtown. 3 blocks away, James and David were pacing around the glass-walled executive boardroom, probably adjusting their ties and waiting for Summit Line Logistics to walk in. It was supposed to be their victory lap, the formal signing of an $85 million contract that would put Novus on the map as a top-tier logistics consultancy. Except one problem. I wasn't there, and the woman who actually closed the deal, who didn't just bring Summit Line in, but carried them through their supply chain disaster last quarter, was now sipping iced coffee in leggings and sneakers. I stared at the screen, not reading, just letting the tension build. Would they bluff their way through it? Pretend I'd transitioned or moved on? Or would they believe what men like David always believed, that people like me are replaceable? My phone buzzed at exactly 9:15. A text from Marcia. "You're late," winking emoji. I stared at the message and smiled, then typed back, "Not attending, let's catch up later." 3 dots blinked, then her reply, "Excuse me." I didn't respond. My fingers trembled slightly as I set the phone down, but it wasn't fear. It was electricity. I felt it in my teeth, in my chest, in the space behind my ribs that had been hollow all weekend. This wasn't just a passive-aggressive protest. This was a deliberate absence. The kind of absence that leaves a dent. At 9:23, my phone rang. Philip, my old teammate. He never called unless something was burning. I answered quietly. "Morning, Flip." "Evie, what the hell did you do? He didn't even say hi." I stirred my coffee calm. "What happened?" "I'm standing outside the boardroom. It's chaos." His voice lowered. "Marcia walked in and asked where you were. James tried some corporate speak about internal transitions. David started blabbing about a new leadership model, and she cut them off. I waited. She said word for word, 'If Evie's not leading this account, we're walking.' Then she got up, just stood, shook hands, and said, 'Call me when you're serious about doing business.' A slow smile spread across my face. I could picture it perfectly. Marcia in her gray pantsuit, calm and precise like a scalpel. James's face probably lost all color. David, I imagined him blinking like someone pulled the ground from under him. Flip continued, "Evie, they look like they got hit by a freight train." David's jaw literally dropped. James tried to stop her, started stammering something about options. She just walked out. "I see." I said it softly, already gathering my things. "Evie," he said again, breathless. It was a thing of beauty. I ended the call, slipped my laptop into my tote bag, still warm from the wood table, walked out of Indigo Bean like I'd just finished a very satisfying brunch. Because the truth was, they didn't fire me because I couldn't perform. They fired me because I didn't fit their idea of who deserved to sit at that table. Until the table collapsed. At 10:02 a.m., my phone rang again. James. I let it buzz twice before answering. "James, Evie." His voice was tight, too upbeat, too rehearsed. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." "Is that so?" "Yes." "Look, we acted hastily last week." His voice faltered for a beat. "We value your work deeply, and we'd like to discuss having you return to lead the Summit Line account. We're open to revisiting your compensation title scope." I stopped walking and leaned against my parked car. "Let me guess, a leadership role. Higher pay, bigger title?" "Yes," he said quickly. "Exactly, you deserve that. And we recognize your strategic importance." I let the silence hang, let him marinate in it. Then I said slow and level, "James, I'm not coming back." He paused, stunned. "Evie, this is $85 million on the line." "No," I said. "It's my integrity on the line." "Evie, please." His voice cracked. That please almost made me pity him. Almost. But I remembered. how small I felt sitting across from them last week. How neatly they delivered the line, like I was a redundant line item in their P&L. I remembered how easily I was erased. And now that the money was walking away, I had value again. I ended the call without another word. I sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, keys in hand, not moving. I wasn't angry. Not exactly. I was awake, like I'd just stepped out of a dream where I'd spent 6 years proving myself to men who never really looked, who'd only ever seen a woman with a community college degree and a messy life, and assumed I was lucky to be in the room. They didn't see the 4 a.m. warehouse visits, the night classes after Mia went to bed. The quarterly targets smashed over and over until breaking records became expected of me. And when I finally became too real, too visible, they replaced me with pedigree. That wasn't a company worth saving. My phone buzzed again. Marcia. Lunch and my treat. I smiled. Nope. My treat this time. Because this wasn't just a good week. This was a rebirth. 3 hours later, I'd be sitting across from Marcia Hastings in a sunlit booth at Harvest Table, and what she'd say next would change the direction of everything. Harvest Table sat tucked behind a stretch of converted warehouses near the east end of downtown Austin, where tech bros in Patagonia vests sipped espresso beside blue-collar teams on lunch break. It was the kind of place that said we grow our own basil without actually having to. I walked in 10 minutes early, my nerves hidden under a denim jacket and dry shampoo. I spotted Marcia Hastings before she waved seated near a wall of windows, backlit like a woman who knew the sun followed her, not the other way around. She looked up from her tea, sharp eyes sweeping me in with a smile that didn't quite reach her mouth. So she said, "You're officially out." I nodded. As of Friday, restructured out of a job by Monday morning. Marcia leaned back in her seat and let out a quiet laugh. I knew James was arrogant. Didn't know he was suicidal. I smiled, but it didn't quite land. A pit still sat in my chest, heavier than any gloating could shake off. I'm not bitter. "You should be," she said, more curious than judgmental. "I'm just done giving my energy to people who didn't value it." Marcia stared at me for a long moment, tapping a finger on her ceramic cup. "Good," she said, "because I want to make you an offer." My eyebrows lifted. "An offer?" She nodded. "I'm not just Summit Line's CEO. I also sit on the advisory board for Blake plus Hawthorne." The name hit like a click behind my ribs. I'd read about them. A fast-growing, data-driven logistics tech firm known for hiring smart, building lean, and moving faster than everyone else in the space. "We're expanding," she continued, aggressively. "They've been searching for a director of business development for months." I blinked. "You want me to interview?" Marcia's smile finally warmed. "No, I want you to have a conversation. I already spoke to their CEO. Aaron Blake. He's interested. Very interested." I sat back stunned. She'd set this up behind the scenes. No warning, no heads up, just handed me a new door, one I didn't even know I could knock on. "You're serious?" "As a heart attack," she said, taking a sip. "And if you land there, let's just say Summit Line's got a few more digits to move around. You'd move the contract." She shrugged. "We haven't signed a damn thing, and I'm not about to pour $85 million into a company that tosses someone like you aside like a bad invoice." I felt it then, a flicker in my chest. Not relief, not pride, hope. A kind I hadn't felt in years. This wasn't a lifeline. It was a launch pad. By noon, I was walking through the hall, the minimalist office space of Blake plus Hawthorne, where plants replaced cubicle walls, and the conference table looked more like a Scandinavian art piece than a war room. Aaron Blake was waiting. Mid-40s, dark, button-down sleeves rolled. No tie, no ego. Just clear eyes and a firm handshake. "Marcia thinks you walk on water," he said. I laughed. "She exaggerates. I just show up. And that, he said, is exactly why you're here." He walked me into his office, no mahogany, no view flaunting, just a big whiteboard filled with messy strategy notes and one photo of what looked like his daughter on a softball field. Real, grounded. "I've read your work," he said, "especially your handling of Summit Line's collapse last fall. You didn't just secure that deal, you salvaged their reputation." I nodded, unsure what to say. He leaned back. "You build relationships, not just pipelines. That's rare. And exactly what we need." He outlined the role. Director of Business Development. reporting directly to him, full autonomy. Build the team, set the tone, lead like I mean it. Then he slid a folder across the desk. Inside base salary higher than anything I'd imagined. Bonus incentives, equity, the real kind. The kind they don't usually offer women who worked night shifts and paid tuition on layaway. I'm not going to insult you by asking for an answer today, Aaron said, but I hope you'll consider it. I closed the folder, looked him in the eye. I don't need time. His eyebrow lifted. I'm in. He extended his hand. Welcome aboard, Evie. We shook. And in that second, something inside me settled. Not because I had a job, but because for the first time in 6 years, I had a voice. The next week moved like lightning. I met every department head, not in stiff meetings, but in their spaces. I listened more than I talked, asked about what slowed them down, where they saw friction, what they'd do differently if they weren't scared of failing. I wasn't there to dazzle. I was there to build. By week 2, I pitched a radical model client-first pods. Not traditional sales units, but cross-functional teams built around trust and long-term partnership. Small, fast, embedded. Aaron listened, nodded once, and said, "Build it." So I did, and the first person I called was Philip. He answered on the first ring. "Evie, you ever considered a change?" The silence on the other end lasted 2 seconds. "When do I start?" He came in Monday. 2 others followed Michelle from finance, and Luis, one of the best operations minds I'd ever worked with. People who, like me, had been overlooked at Novus for being too real, too blunt, too grounded. We weren't poaching, we were rising. By the end of the month, we landed a contract that had been stuck in Novus's pipeline for a year. Marcia kept her word too. Summit Line officially signed with Blake plus Hawthorne. $85 million redirected. And just like that, we weren't just growing. We were a threat. But I had no idea who else had been watching, or how fast the fallout would hit. It started with a whisper. The first week after Summit Line's $85 million contract went public, a few familiar names started appearing in my inbox. No subject lines, just direct Slack messages or LinkedIn pings from former contacts, past colleagues, people I hadn't heard from in years. Some were curious, others were careful, but they all had the same question beneath their corporate pleasantries. What's happening at Blake plus Hawthorne? The logistics world is smaller than anyone admits. Deals ripple, people talk. And when a massive client like Summit Line shifts its loyalty overnight, folks pay attention, especially when it leaves a legacy firm like Novus looking dazed and a little hollow. By week 4, we'd landed 3 additional contracts. One was a regional food distributor I'd worked with years ago when their supply chain was still held together with Excel sheets and duct tape. Another came from a client Novus had been courting for over 18 months. No movement, no close. They signed with us in 10 days. Not because we offered something fancy, because we showed up, we spoke human. We delivered answers, not taglines. I started hearing rumors. David Sinclair had gone quiet. His LinkedIn bio stayed updated, but people noticed he wasn't posting anymore. A few whispers said he was reassigned internally, which in corporate speak meant one of 2 things. Either he was boxed in with no power, or they were prepping his exit. I didn't celebrate, not out loud, not even privately, because this wasn't about watching anyone fall. It was about watching something better rise. One afternoon, I wrapped up a vendor call and looked up to find Philip standing in my doorway, holding a paper printout like it was radioactive. "You're going to want to see this." I raised a brow, reaching for it. It was a screenshot of a headline from a logistics journal. Novus Consulting reports 2nd consecutive quarter of revenue decline. I scanned the article. 2 major clients had exited. Internal restructuring was mentioned. Again. Stock value down 25%. "They're spiraling," Philip said. Summit Line pulled the thread and the whole sweater's unraveling. I leaned back in my chair, fingers tapping the edge of my desk. A framed drawing from Mia sat beside me. She'd given it to me the day I accepted the role here. A little sketch of me in a cape holding a laptop like a sword. It said, "You got this, Mom," in purple crayon. I kept it right next to my ACC diploma. One reminder of where I came from, one reminder of why I kept going. This was never about taking them down, I said almost to myself. Philip gave a quiet nod. No. But it turns out treating people like they're disposable has consequences. I didn't need to reply. The silence between us said enough. That evening, as I packed up, my phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated before answering. Evie, the voice came after a pause. It's James. For a second, I couldn't place it. His tone was flat, drained. Nothing like the man in the $1,000 suit who'd once said I wasn't the right pedigree. I didn't expect this call, I said evenly. I wanted to. Check in, he said. See how you're doing. I almost laughed. I'm doing well, James. Very well. He cleared his throat. I won't take your time. Just if you're open to having a conversation, I'd be grateful. There it was. Not arrogance, not slick strategy, just quiet desperation dressed as humility. I let the silence stretch before replying. Thank you, but I think we're on very different paths now. I understand, he said, voice lower. I really do. And then he hung up. That night, I poured a glass of wine and sat on my balcony. The Austin skyline glowed soft in the distance, and Mia was asleep inside, curled up under the blanket we'd picked together at the flea market last fall. I stared out at the sky, feeling something I hadn't let myself believe I deserved. Peace. I wasn't chasing respect anymore. I'd built it. 3 months later, I stood backstage at the National Supply Chain Expo in Denver. Blake plus Hawthorne wasn't just attending, we were headlining. I was giving the keynote. And even now, as I adjusted the mic pack on the back of my blazer, it felt unreal. When Aaron first suggested it, I'd laughed. Me keynote. Why not you? He asked. You've tripled our client portfolio in under a year. You've done what people said wasn't possible. You've earned the stage. Thuxy? So I took it. I stepped out into a crowd of 1,000 executives, industry leaders, investors, even a few media outlets. My palms were damp, but my voice was steady. I talked about relationships, about what it means to build trust that lasts longer than a quarterly target. I told the story not with bitterness, but with clarity of what happens when companies value pedigree over performance and how they lose the very people who carried them forward. The applause was real, but the part that hit hardest came after. One by one, people approached me. Handshakes, cards, invitations. A woman from a rival firm said I've never heard someone speak like that, like they actually lived it. I did, I said. Every word. Then I saw him, standing near the back of the crowd, tucked behind a promotional banner, scanning the room like a man looking for the fire exit. James. Our eyes met. He stepped forward. Evie, he said. James, my voice was calm, professional. You were impressive this morning. Thank you. He shifted awkwardly. I wanted to reach out sooner. I didn't respond. We've lost 3 major accounts. David's gone. The board asked for his resignation after the Summit Line fallout. And you, I asked. I'm still standing. Barely. The board's considering options, mergers, even a sale. For a moment, I felt something I didn't expect. Pity. Not for him, but for the people still inside Novus. The ones who believed, who stayed loyal, who never had the chance to walk out on their own terms. I see, I said. Then came the words I knew were coming. I came to ask if you'd consider coming back. And for a moment, I didn't say no. I stood there blinking, not because I was confused by what James had just said, but because for the first time in our history, he wasn't speaking from a position of control. He wasn't bargaining or bluffing. He was exposed. I came to ask if you'd consider coming back, he repeated. Same words, but now I could hear what lay underneath. Fear, exhaustion, regret. The weight of leadership when the pedestal cracks beneath you. I looked at him not as the CEO who fired me, but as a man standing in the wreckage of a company he thought he'd always control. For a moment, I remembered my last day at Novus. That sterile conference room, David's smug voice, James's nonchalant delivery of my sentence. I remembered the tremble in my hands that I wouldn't show, and the knot in my stomach that stayed for weeks after. 6 months ago, I would have dreamed of this moment. I would have played it out in my mind like a fantasy. He comes crawling back. I walk away triumphant. But standing there under the soft white lights of the expo hall, I didn't feel triumph. I felt clarity. You didn't value me when it mattered, I said quietly. Why now? James sighed. His shoulders sagged a little more. Because I was wrong. About you. About what really drives this business. I listened to the wrong voices. I let the board pressure me. I let David run strategy he didn't understand. And now, we need leadership. We need credibility. Clients trust you, Evie. You were never just a manager. You were the heart of our growth. I just didn't see it until we lost it." He paused. "Until I lost you." For the first time, his voice held no pretense, no management tone, just a man trying to rewind a clock he couldn't touch anymore. I didn't respond right away. I wasn't trying to punish him. I wasn't there to hold a grudge. I just knew my answer wasn't going to be simple. Part of me, the younger version of me, wanted to prove I could save Novus, that I was bigger than what they reduced me to. But the woman I was now didn't need to be their redemption. "James," I said finally, "it's not personal, but I'm exactly where I want to be." He nodded slowly, like he'd been holding out hope until that moment. Then it fell from his face. "I understand." I started to turn, then stopped. "For what it's worth, I hope this humbles you, and I hope it makes you a better leader than you were to me." He looked back, something flickering behind his eyes. "Relief, grief, gratitude, I think it already has," he said. And then he was gone. I stood there for a long time, staring at the space he'd occupied. It didn't feel like a scene from a revenge drama. It felt like closing the cover of a book I didn't need to reread. There was nothing more to win, nothing left to fix. What mattered most was that I didn't flinch. I didn't need his approval anymore. 3 months later, I stood in the new top-floor conference room of Blake plus Hawthorne's Austin HQ. The skyline glittered behind us like opportunity stretched wide open. Around the table, Philip, Michelle, Louis, Marcia, and Aaron. My team, my people. Our Q2 numbers were spread across the table like confetti. Client retention at an all-time high, new contracts secured across 4 sectors, and the Summit Line partnership thriving beyond projection. But what caught everyone's attention wasn't just the metrics, it was the culture. Turnover minimal, engagement through the roof, and trust earned across every level of the company. Aaron leaned forward, voice calm but firm. "Evie, when we brought you in, I knew you'd drive results, but this has transformed how we do business." Philip grinned. "And how we treat people." I looked around the room. These weren't just coworkers. They were allies, people who'd believed in me when the world was silent. It wasn't about title anymore. It was about impact. After the meeting ended, Aaron caught me by the elevator, a walk with me. We strolled past glass-walled offices and open workspaces, past quiet energy and focused people. This company wasn't built on pedigree or flash. It was built on grit, on listening, on seeing. He stopped near the balcony that overlooked South Congress. The air was warm, thick with summer coming on early. "I wanted to say thank you," Aaron said. I smiled. "For what?" "For betting on us, and for betting on yourself." Then he took a deep breath, the kind you take before changing everything. "The board met this morning," he said. "We're restructuring, expanding, and we want you to take on a bigger role." I tilted my head. "Bigger how? Chief Commercial Officer? Reporting directly to me. Full oversight on business development, client relations, and strategic partnerships. The people stuff, the heart of the company." I stared at him, not because I didn't feel ready, but because this was the first time someone had offered me a role that matched what I already saw in myself. Not as a seat at the table, but as the person designing the table. Aaron held up his hands. "No pressure. You've earned this, all of it. But we want you to grow with us." For a long moment, I said nothing. Not because I doubted myself, but because I realized something deeper. I wasn't here to prove anything. I was here to lead. I nodded slowly. "I'm in." Aaron smiled. "I knew you'd say that." We shook hands. And this time, it didn't feel like an opportunity dangled or a favor returned. It felt like a partnership built on clarity, not convenience. That night, as I turned out the lights in my office, I paused by the framed drawing from Mia. Her crayon cape, my name in crooked letters. It didn't just remind me of how far I'd come. It reminded me who I'd done it for. But just as I reached for my bag, a ping lit up my screen, an internal alert. A client name I hadn't heard in months, a name I never expected to cross our path again. Orion. The alert blinked once, simple, cold, unmistakable. Inbound inquiry, Orion Technologies, requesting consultation availability. I stared at the screen, frozen for just a second. My hand still hovered over my bag strap. Then slowly I set it down. It had been over 6 months since I'd walked out of Novus, 6 months since I'd heard the name Orion in any context that wasn't wrapped in failure or rumor. And now, suddenly, their name was pulsing on my dashboard, like a ghost trying to come back from the dead. I clicked in. The request wasn't automated. It wasn't from a junior assistant or a procurement bot. It was manual, typed, signed, from an email I knew by heart. James Whitaker at Orion Consulting. Com, subject urgent consultation. Request for partnership discussion. Message Evie. I know this is unexpected. The board has asked me to explore outside partnership paths, and your firm has repeatedly come up as the gold standard in strategic delivery and client retention. Would you be open to a conversation? I leaned back, staring at the message like it might disappear if I blinked. It didn't. The logo sat in the upper left corner, like a reminder of everything I'd survived. 10 minutes later, Philip stepped into my office holding a LaCroix and raised an eyebrow. You saw it? I didn't look away from the screen. Yeah. He set the can down. You gonna reply? I finally turned to him. They're not looking to partner, they're looking to survive. He nodded, cracking the can open. Well? They picked the right table this time. He wasn't wrong. After Summit Line, after 3 major clients had jumped ship after David's abrupt exit, and the whispers of private equity circling Orion wasn't the same company that let me go. They were exposed publicly and internally, and they knew the difference now between packaging and performance, between pedigree and trust. But that didn't mean I owed them anything. Still, the strategist in me, the part that once rebuilt their portfolio from nothing, felt the pull. Not to save them, but to see what was left. To see the price of undervaluing the very people who carried them. I replied simply, available for 30 minutes Friday at 2 p.m. virtual. Friday came fast. I logged in from a quiet side room in our Austin HQ, a single beam of sunlight cutting across the table like a spotlight. When the Zoom connected, James appeared in his usual blazer, but he looked smaller. His background wasn't the Novus conference room. It was a plain office, no glass, no views. Just him. Alone. Evie, he said, his voice low but composed. Thank you for taking the time. I nodded. Let's keep it focused. He didn't flinch. We're exploring merger scenarios. The board is considering multiple options. Your name came up repeatedly, not just yours but your firm's. You've outperformed everyone in the space this year. I waited. We're hemorrhaging, he admitted. Morale is low. Client trust is worse. And, frankly, the board believes you may be the only person who could stabilize a transition. I let the weight of that sit. You don't need a consultant, I said. You need a rescue plan. And I'm not in that business. James blinked slowly. Would you even consider a bid? I tilted my head. You want us to acquire you? He didn't answer at first. Then we'd prefer to call it a strategic absorption. I laughed. Once. Soft and sharp. Of course you would. I should have ended the call. I should have closed the laptop and walked away into the career I'd built on my own terms. But something deeper pressed at me, something that wasn't revenge or power. It was about people, about the ones still at Orion who didn't have a Marcia, who didn't have the chance I got. You let me go, I said. Not because I underperformed, but because I didn't fit your narrative. You chose image over impact. Now you're asking the person you dismissed to restore your credibility. I know, he said quietly. And I don't expect forgiveness. But I do believe in second chances. Not for me, for them. Them, the team, the ones still there, the ones trying to hold it together. For a moment, the weight behind his words felt real. Not polished, not tactical, just honest. I'll think about it, I said. He nodded. That's more than I hoped for. We ended the call. That night, I sat with Mia at the kitchen table as she worked on her science fair project, building a conveyor belt model from popsicle sticks and a shoebox. She was laser-focused, tongue peeking from the corner of her mouth, just like I used to do when deep in spreadsheets and chaos. You ever think about going back to somewhere you left? I asked her, half serious. She didn't look up. Why would I go back if I left for a reason? I smiled. Smart girl. But still, I didn't sleep much. The thought gnawed at me. The next morning, I walked into Aaron's office, closed the door, and laid it out. Every detail. The offer. The state of Orion. James's tone. His ask. His desperation. Aaron listened without interruption. When I finished, he leaned forward, elbows on the desk. I trust you, he said. If you believe there's value, we'll look into it. but only if it aligns with who we are, not just what we can gain. I nodded. I don't want to save them. I want to rebuild something better for the people who still deserve more. He smiled. Then let's explore it. We brought in our legal team. Finance, HR, discreet under NDA, quiet calls, careful meetings. It all moved fast because Orion was running out of time. 3 weeks later, a deal sat on the table, and the final decision was mine. The room was quiet as I stood at the head of the glass-walled conference room inside Blake plus Hawthorne's Austin 8Q. The city stretched behind me, sunlight dancing off glass towers, cranes turning above new builds, a skyline that had grown with me. Around the table sat the people who mattered most: Aaron Marcia, Philip, Michelle Luis. Our legal team had just finalized the language. HR was ready. Finance had run the numbers twice. The final acquisition terms had landed on my desk at 7:03 a.m., and the only person who hadn't signed yet was me. They were calling it a strategic asset integration, but we all knew what it really was. Orion Bleeding Cash Broken Trust Empty Seats was coming under our roof. Under mine. Not as a comeback, not as a favor, but because we were the only ones left who still knew how to do the work. The real work. And because I refused to let the people still fighting inside that company be collateral damage for someone else's ego. Aaron spoke first. It's your call, Evie. We'll back whatever you decide, but you don't owe them anything. I looked down at the folder, my name typed clean across the top, then glanced at the photo framed beside me. Mia's drawing. The purple cape, you got this, Mom. I'm not doing this for them, I said. I'm doing it for every person who stayed when it was easier to quit. For the warehouse analyst who hasn't gotten a raise in 3 years. For the project lead who kept the lights on during 2 restructurings. For the interns who think titles mean value. I paused. And for the girl who once believed she had to be grateful just to be in the room. I signed. 2 months later, the transition was complete. Orion's name didn't disappear, but its culture did. We kept what was worth saving, let the rest go. Some leadership stayed those willing to adapt. Most didn't. We restructured from the inside out, cross-functional teams, transparency over politics, trust over prestige. We didn't rebuild Novus. We absorbed it, then redefined it. At our first all-hands town hall, I stood in front of the newly blended staff, a few hundred faces both familiar and new. I told them the truth, about how I'd once sat in a room just like this, heart-pounding, as people with shinier degrees and louder voices decided I wasn't enough. About how the future didn't belong to pedigrees, it belonged to people who showed up, who listened, who delivered. The applause was quiet at first, then steady, then real. By the end of that quarter, retention had spiked. Clients were returning slowly, cautiously. Not because we promised more, because we followed through. Word got around again, not about what we'd taken, but what we were building. A few weeks later, I got a message, anonymous tip form through our internal system. It was short, just said, "I'm still here. Thank you for not forgetting us." No name, just one person finally breathing again. Some stories don't end with revenge. They end with responsibility. I wasn't the woman they discarded anymore. I was the one who wrote the next chapter on my terms. The one who proved you don't have to climb someone else's ladder when you can build your own platform. And I wasn't done. Because as I stepped back into my office, Mia's voice echoed in my head from the night before when she'd looked up from her homework and said, "Mom, when I grow up, I think I want to be the boss." I smiled and told her the truth. "You already are, honey. You just haven't hired your team yet." I picked up a fresh legal brief off my desk, an unsolicited inquiry. Another firm, bigger, global, wanting to merge, not just acquire. And this time, they weren't calling me a manager. They were calling me a visionary, or two. They say family is forever. I used to believe that until the day my mother looked me in the eye, holding the door barely open with one hand, and said, "This is just for family." Clara, I hope you understand. I was standing there with my 2 kids, wind slicing through our coats. My daughter Ava in a navy dress with embroidered stars. My son Leo gripping a crinkled homemade card that read, "Happy Thanksgiving, Grandma." I held a warm pumpkin pie in my left hand, still steaming, but she didn't budge. Her voice was gentle, the kind she used when she used to pretend to care. But her eyes, they weren't soft. They weren't sorry. They were cold, calculated, She didn't look at my kids as people. She looked through them. I forced a smile. Bent down. "Let's go get pizza," I whispered, because I wouldn't let them see me break. We turned. No tears, no drama. Just the quiet sound of the wreath slipping off the door behind us as it thudded to the porch. I didn't flinch. I should have known better. I should have expected it. But part of me, the stupid loyal part that still thought I belonged, had hoped for a seat at the table. We ended up in a rundown pizza place on Main and 5th. Greasy red booth, sticky menus, and a waitress who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. Ava told her it was our special Thanksgiving pizza party. She said it like it was magic. I smiled, stirred my soda with a straw. That's when my phone buzzed. My brother, named Nate. Message, "What the hell did you do?" No hello, no context, just accusation. I blinked. "What are you talking about?" His reply was a slap in text form. "The family trust account is frozen." Why? And just like that, I knew. I leaned back, watching melted cheese stretch between Ava's fork and Leo's slice. They were laughing. They had no idea a war had started over mozzarella and betrayal. You see, I didn't touch that trust account. Not today, anyway. But I could have. Because guess whose name was still on it after Dad died? Guess who handled every penny, every form, every detail? Me. Not because I wanted control, but because they asked. Because they trusted me when it suited them. When they needed help paying off Mom's second mortgage. When Nate's startup flopped and he needed a loan. When our sister Jess temporarily needed a car but forgot how leases worked. I was the fixer, the family bank. And banks don't usually get thanked. But banks do have locks. It wasn't the betrayal that broke me. It was the ease. The way they erased me without flinching. The way my kids heard a message I spent my whole life silencing. "You're not enough. You never were." Later that night, Nate called again. I answered. "You made your point, Clara. Now fix it." Fix what? The account. Mom's mortgage payment bounced. Jess can't make her lease. I took a deep breath. "You think this is about money?" "It always is," he snapped. "No, Nate. It's about boundaries. You slammed the door on me. I'm just closing the books." That weekend, while the rest of the family posted blurry selfies of turkey and wine on Instagram, I made calls. To the bank, to my lawyer, to every institution that had my signature on something that didn't serve me anymore. By Monday, I had compiled a list that made me nauseous. $14,200 still owed on Jess's lease, my name on it. $22,000 in family emergency debt from Nate's business line unpaid. $9,000 in annual payments I'd quietly added to the trust fund for 5 years straight because Mom said she just needed a little help. Help, I've learned, is another word for drain in my family. So I turned off the tap. The last straw wasn't even the frozen account. It was the silence. No apology, no explanation. Not even a fake "we miss you" message. Just confusion, outrage. As if the ATM had suddenly grown a spine and they didn't know how to function without it. 3 days later, Mom called. "Clara," she said with her best guilt-laced voice, "your brother said you locked the account." "Sweetheart, we had no warning. That's the emergency fund. Your father left it for the family." I looked at the faded photo of my dad on my fridge. He'd always told me I was the glue, the one who held everyone together. "Well, maybe they should have kept the glue inside," I said flatly. Mom huffed. "Don't be cruel." Cruel. They slammed a door in my child's face. I smiled, bitter and sweet. "Don't confuse clarity with cruelty, Mom." Click. Let me be clear, I didn't plan revenge. But I'm a woman who plans. And there's a difference. This wasn't spite. This was accounting. Emotional and financial. For every time they laughed at my modest clothes. For every time they told me I was too sensitive. For every time they used me without credit. I wasn't burning bridges. I was building a gate. With a lock. The Monday after Thanksgiving, I woke to 12 missed calls. 10 were from Nate, 1 from Jess, and 1 from a number I didn't recognize, but something in my gut told me it was probably their latest attempt to recruit a third-party guilt delivery service. I didn't call back. I didn't text. I sat on my balcony with a lukewarm mug of coffee, watching the sky shift from steel gray to that weak December blue, and I waited. At 11:42 a.m., Nate finally broke the silence with something other than a demand. He sent a text that simply said, "Can we talk?" And that's when I knew he needed something. I called. He picked up immediately, voice strained and trying to sound casual. "Hey, Clara. Look, I know things got out of hand. But can we clear the air? Maybe talk face to face? I let the pause stretch out just long enough to make him squirm. Sure, I said. I'll bring the statements. He hesitated. What statements? You'll see. We met at a cafe near his office, the kind of sleek place with reclaimed wood tables and $4 espresso shots. Nate wore his usual uniform pressed button-up shirt, smartwatch, too much cologne. He smiled like nothing had happened, like he wasn't the same man who barked at me over the phone 4 days ago. You look great, he said. How are the kids? I dropped a folder on the table. We're fine. That's for you. He opened it. Inside was a breakdown of every single favor loan payment and account linked to my name over the past 8 years. Color-coded, itemized, annotated. Because if they were going to call me cruel, they'd do it while holding the receipts. His face paled as he flipped through the pages. Clara, what is this? A reckoning, I said calmly. Every dollar I covered, every signature I gave, every risk I took so you and Jess and Mom could keep pretending the trust fund was magic. He flipped to a page labeled Jess's lease. His mouth tightened. This isn't accurate. It is, I said. She stopped paying in July. You co-signed too, but I was the primary. I paid the last 3 months. Quietly, like always. He looked like someone had just slapped him with his own wallet. Okay, but freezing the trust, that was nuclear. I tilted my head. No, Nate, that was me stepping out of the blast radius. You just didn't notice the fire until it reached your feet. He started to speak again, but I raised a hand. Let me ask you something. When Mom told me not to come to Thanksgiving, was that your idea? What? No, I didn't even know until the day of. So you didn't speak up. His silence answered for him. I leaned back in my chair. You want to clear the air, Nate, start by owning the part where you watched me get shoved out of our family and said nothing. His voice dropped almost a whisper. I didn't think she meant it. I thought, you'd come anyway. I let out a short laugh. Of course. Because I'm predictable, dependable, the one who shows up and pays up, right? He looked down. I didn't mean it like that. You meant it exactly like that. He pushed the folder back toward me, like it was burning his fingers. So what now? You're cutting everyone off. No, I said, taking the folder and sliding it into my bag. I'm done funding people who don't see me as family. There's a difference. That night, Jess called. No preamble, just raw panic. Clara, the dealership's calling me non-stop. I thought you paid December's lease. They're saying I'm in default. You are, I replied, washing dishes with the phone on speaker. She exploded. Why would you do that? You said you had it. I said I covered it, past tense. You're being selfish. I laughed. Sweetheart, you were selfish the moment you lied to Mom about my attitude, just so I wouldn't be invited to Thanksgiving. You think I didn't find out? Silence. Then I didn't lie. I just told her what you said last year. You mean the part where I asked not to host Christmas alone again? Yeah? Real aggressive. You're twisting things. I turned off the tap. You all spent years twisting. I just straightened the rope. Jess sobbed. I'm losing my car. I felt nothing. That terrified me in the best way. The fallout came faster than I expected. By the end of the week, I got a letter from the bank confirming the trust account was frozen pending review. Nate's business line was red-flagged due to unpaid debts. Jess's lease default triggered a cascade of credit issues. And Mom? Well, Mom finally called, not to apologize, but to guilt. She opened with, I raised you better than this. I replied, no, you raised me to tolerate being used. I've since upgraded. She launched into the usual, how the family was struggling, how I should be above revenge. But I wasn't doing this for payback. I was doing it for peace. What people forget about the family scapegoat is this: we know everything. We remember who borrowed what, who said what, who hurt us, and chalked it up to jokes or stress. And for years we carry the weight, thinking it's love, but it's not. It's debt, emotional debt, financial debt. And one day we wake up and realize the only way to breathe again is to stop paying it. That day had come for me. In the weeks that followed, something surprising happened. My life got quieter, calmer. The constant buzz of expectation, guilt, and obligation faded into something almost peaceful. I decorated my apartment with Ava and Leo without a single sarcastic comment from Mom about trying too hard. I bought cheap ornaments and dollar store lights, and for the first time they felt priceless. At bedtime, Leo asked Mom, "Are we going to Grandma's for Christmas?" I kissed his forehead. "No, honey. This year we're making our own tradition. He nodded sleepily. Cool. Can we have waffles? You bet. But the storm wasn't over. Because one of them, the quiet one I didn't expect, was about to turn on them all. And he'd been watching everything. You ever have someone in your life who was always there but never really in it? Someone who drifted through family functions with a quiet smile, a camera slung over their shoulder, half invisible, until suddenly they weren't. That was my cousin Daniel. Daniel was Aunt Marie's only son, younger than me, by 5 years, always the observer. While the rest of the family fought for center stage, he recorded everything: birthdays, holidays, barbecues, graduations, quietly documenting the chaos, like a wildlife photographer studying lions fighting over a carcass. We never talked much growing up. He was the quiet type, more into documentaries and drones than drama. But I remembered how when my parents used to snap at me during family dinners, he'd subtly shift the camera away, never filming my worst moments. A silent kindness. One I didn't forget. So when he texted me 3 days before Christmas and asked if I had time to talk, I was intrigued. Not suspicious, just curious. He asked to meet at a bookstore cafe downtown. One of those places with creaky floors and staff who could talk for hours about first editions. He ordered chamomile tea. I got black coffee. No small talk. He pulled out a hard drive, slid it across the table, and said, "You might want to see this." I blinked. What am I looking at? Thanksgiving footage, he said. The wireless mics picked up everything. My heart skipped. Everything. He nodded, eyes calm. Paul, Uncle Robert's son, helped me install the mics around the house for a family video project. You know, candid moments. I never expected what we got. He opened his laptop and pulled up a video. The screen flickered to life, and there they were, my mother Nate, Jess, all seated around the long oak dining table. Champagne glasses, polished silverware. My kids' absence not even mentioned. But my name. Oh, they said it plenty. I just didn't want Clara's energy here, Jess said, flipping her hair. She always makes things heavy. She was so dramatic about the wedding thing last year, Nate chimed in, slicing his turkey. We were joking, and she took it personally. Then Mom laughing over a glass of white wine. Clara's always needed to feel special. That's why she keeps tallying everything she's done for the family. Like we owe her gratitude for being decent. I watched in stunned silence as they rewrote history in real time. As they spun my boundaries into betrayal, my generosity into narcissism. Daniel didn't interrupt, just let it play. There was one moment, though, that made me grip the edge of the table. Jess leaned in and whispered to Mom. She's still on the trust, right? Of course, Mom replied. Clara would never touch it. She wants to look like a martyr, not a monster. That was the moment, right there. The exact second I knew none of it had been accidental. The door slammed in my face, wasn't a misunderstanding. It was calculated, cold, and they thought I was too spineless to ever fight back. I exhaled slowly, feeling something sharp and solid settle into place inside me. Daniel closed the laptop. I've been sitting on that for weeks, but when I heard they were blaming you for freezing the trust, I figured you had a right to know. I stared at him. Why now? He hesitated, then shrugged. I've watched you hold this family up for years while they pretended you didn't exist. I guess I just got tired of filming lies. I nodded. Thank you. I don't know what I'll do with it yet, but thank you. He handed me the drive. Whatever you do, make it count. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table, coffee untouched, laptop open. I watched that video 3 more times. Not because I needed the confirmation, I just wanted the clarity to sink deep. Because revenge done out of rage burns too fast, but revenge done out of truth, that lingers. I didn't want a courtroom, I didn't need a public fight, but I did need them to know I saw them. All of them. Clearly. So I wrote an email, short, precise. Attached the footage and a message that read, "This is who you are when you think I'm not watching. Consider this my official resignation from the role of family scapegoat. I won't be needing the trust anymore, but I will be ensuring I'm legally removed from all financial liabilities going forward. Merry Christmas." I hit send, sat back, and for the first time in years I felt clean. The fallout came swift and loud. Jess called first, voice high, panicked. "Clara? What the hell is this? You had no right to record private conversations." I cut her off. I didn't. Paul did. Daniel shared it with me. You don't get to hide behind private when the masks slip off. You're going to destroy the family. I laughed. No, Jess, you already did. I'm just turning on the lights. Nate emailed a few hours later. Not to deny anything, just to beg me not to share the video with our extended family. It was a bad moment, he wrote. We were drinking. People talk. I replied, and now they listen. Then Mom. Predictably, she bypassed any admission. Clara, this is beneath you. We're family. We don't tear each other down. I stared at that message for a long time before responding. We also don't slam doors in our grandchildren's faces. But here we are. Daniel called that evening. You okay? I told him the truth. I think I'm better than I've ever been. He chuckled. You know the best part of being behind the camera all these years? I learned to see through the smiles. They never fooled me. Not really. Then why didn't you say anything? He sighed. Because I thought maybe you were stronger than I was. And I was right. Christmas came quietly. No invitations, no phone calls. Just me, Ava, and Leo in pajamas on the couch, watching old movies, and making snowflake cookies that came out more blob than shape. But we laughed. We played music. We danced in the kitchen. At one point, Leo asked Mom, do we have a big family? I knelt down. We have a good one. That's even better. Ava nodded. We're enough. And we were. But this wasn't the end. Not yet. Because while Jess was busy hiding from creditors, and Nate tried to patch his broken business reputation, someone from outside the family had gotten wind of the trust account. And they wanted answers. Legal ones. What came next wasn't something I started. But I wasn't going to stop it either. You don't expect your world to shift because of a white envelope. No warning label. No bold red urgent sticker. Just plain stiff paper with my full name typed clean across the center. Clara Emerson. No return address I recognized, but I knew the weight the second I touched it. I was in the middle of vacuuming pine needles off the living room rug when I spotted it half buried under a stack of late Christmas cards. While Ava and Leo were arguing over who got the last sugar cookie, I slipped into the kitchen, opened the envelope, and pulled out 3 pages from the firm of Harrison Vale, LLP. First sentence. This letter serves as notification that the Emerson Family Trust is under formal financial review by third-party fiduciary auditors, effective immediately. The room seemed to shrink. I read it again, slower. Then again, absorbing each line like it was being tattooed on my bones. They weren't investigating me. They were investigating them. And the irony was so thick I had to sit down. Turns out, when I froze the trust account in early December, the bank flagged certain irregularities. Unusual withdrawal patterns, lopsided distributions, beneficiary misuse. Apparently, Nate's last-minute attempt to shuffle money around to cover his business losses had triggered the bank's internal fraud detection system. One domino had tipped, and now the whole stack was under scrutiny. Jess's name appeared 5 times in the letter, Mom's 11. There was a footnote referencing Sang's non-authorized secondary credit instruments, which I knew meant the emergency credit card Mom had kept renewing, using my identity as co-signer. A card I never used. A card I thought had been closed years ago. They used my name, my credit, my silence. But now that silence had turned into evidence, I wasn't angry. I wasn't afraid. I was ready. The next morning, I dropped the kids off with their favorite babysitter, grabbed my binder of financial records, and drove to the law firm listed in the letter. The office was sleek and quiet, tucked into a high-rise downtown, where everything smelled like new carpet and expensive toner. A paralegal led me to a conference room where a woman named Erica Vale greeted me with the firm handshake of someone who had seen every kind of family implosion imaginable. She smiled warmly. Clara, thank you for coming in. Happy to, I said. I've been waiting for this shoe to drop for years. She motioned to a chair. Then you're going to love what's next. Erica laid out a folder of findings. Bank statements, internal memos, copies of forms with forged or manipulated dates. She pointed to one signature. See that that's yours? I nodded. Nope. That's a copy-paste from a different document. The loops in the C don't match my handwriting. We thought so, she said. That's one of 12. 12 forged signatures, used to siphon money from the family trust into private accounts under the names of Jess, Nate, and even my mother. It wasn't just mismanagement. It was fraud. And technically, because I was listed as the primary administrator until I froze it, they'd left me holding the bag. Unless I spoke. So I did. I gave Erica everything. Emails, statements, screenshots, voicemails, dates, timelines. The original lease I signed for Jess's car, and proof of every payment I'd made when she couldn't or wouldn't. I brought the paper trail, and Erica built the map. "This will help," she said, flipping through my binder. "But there's something else." She slid me a printed copy of a subpoena. A subpoena. To testify. Against my family. You'd think I'd hesitate. You'd think I'd agonize over loyalty. But I didn't. Because I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to admit before. I'd never actually had their loyalty. I'd only had their need. And when the need ran out, or I did, they dropped me like expired milk. Testifying wasn't revenge. It was self-defense. It was choosing air after years of drowning. I said yes. That night, I stood at my kitchen sink, staring out the window into the snowy dark, thinking about how much had changed in a month. One slammed door, one quiet walk to the car with my kids, one pizza dinner, and now subpoenas, audits, and a court date looming in February. Ava patted in with her blanket set, rubbing her eyes. "Mama, why are you still up?" I scooped her up and kissed her forehead. "Just thinking." "About what?" I paused. "About being brave." She nodded like she understood, even if she didn't. "You are brave." And just like that, I didn't need anyone else's version of me. Not Mom's guilt-tripped martyr, not Nate's grudge-holding nuisance, not Jess's scapegoat. I was Ava and Leo's mother, the woman who chose dignity over approval. I was brave, and I was done hiding it. 3 days later, Mom sent a text. Just one line. "You're really going to destroy everything, aren't you?" I didn't reply. Not because I didn't have something to say, but because the silence was finally louder than her manipulations. Jess followed up with a sob-filled voicemail. "You don't understand, Clara. They're going to take my car. My credit's ruined. I might lose my job." She never once said I'm sorry. Not once. And Nate, he sent a lawyer. Mine sent one back. On New Year's Eve, while half the city poured champagne and counted down to midnight, I tucked Ava and Leo into bed with promises of sparkling apple cider in the morning. Then I sat on my couch, lit a single candle, and wrote myself a letter. Just one page. Not to them. To me. It started with, "You were always enough, even when they acted like you weren't." I wrote about the lies I swallowed, the guilt I carried, the way I bent until I cracked. I wrote about the strength it took to walk away, to say no, to say nothing at all. I folded the letter, sealed it, and tucked it inside the kitchen drawer. Not as evidence, but as a reminder. The thing about standing up for yourself is that people will call it betrayal when they've built a system that depends on your silence. But boundaries aren't betrayal, and truth isn't cruelty. And next month, when I take the stand and look them in the eye, I won't be angry. I'll be calm, because I've already won. Not the trust money, not the courtroom battle, something bigger, my voice. And no one gets to take that again. February 12th. The date had circled itself on my calendar like an omen. By the time it arrived, the sky was dull and brittle with frost, the kind that clings to your coat and refuses to let go. I dropped Ava and Leo off with my friend Grace. She'd stocked her living room with snacks and movies and promised I'd be home in time for dinner. "What's court like?" Leo had asked that morning, wide-eyed, his cereal spoon hovering in midair. I smiled. "It's where grown-ups have to tell the truth, even when they don't want to." He nodded like he got it. And maybe he did. The courthouse smelled like cold coffee and floor polish. I wore a navy blue suit that used to belong to my boss, who gave it to me last year when she upgraded her wardrobe. "You'll need it someday," she said, "for something big." I didn't know then how right she was. I walked past security with my head high, every step louder in my ears than it needed to be. They directed me to a second-floor hearing room, modest, no jury box, but official enough that it made your spine straighten just being in it. Inside, the room buzzed with low tension. My mother sat to the left with her attorney lips pressed so tightly they'd gone white. Jess looked pale and jittery, flipping her phone face down over and over. Nate wore the same expensive suit he always used for damage control, though today it seemed to hang off him like a costume he didn't quite fit into anymore. None of them looked at me. That was fine. I wasn't there for their eyes. I was there for the record. Erica, my attorney, sat beside me, calm and precise as always. "You ready?" she asked under her breath. I didn't answer with words, just a slow nod. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The room settled. What followed wasn't fireworks or dramatic yelling. No gavel banging. No sobbing confessions. Just a slow, methodical unspooling of facts. Erica laid out the case like a surgeon, clinical, undeniable clean. She showed the forged signatures blown up on screen compared with my real handwriting. She played audio from voicemails that dripped with entitlement. She presented the bank reports showing how the trust fund had been used for personal luxuries, first-class flights, designer handbags, private fitness instructors, all tagged as medical travel or educational consulting. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't perform. I didn't monologue. I told the truth like I was hanging laundry out to dry. I didn't realize how deep the misuse went until I stepped away, I said. For years I told myself I was helping, that family sacrifices, that love looks like covering the bills no one talks about. But it wasn't help, it was silence. And silence in this family is a currency they spent freely. The judge asked if I ever gave consent for my name to be used on those credit lines. No, I answered, not once. He nodded. Were you aware you were still legally responsible for these debts? Not until the collection notices came. And by then, they were already framing it as a mistake. A glitch. But it wasn't a glitch, it was a system. When I sat down, I didn't feel like collapsing. I felt taller. Then came the part I didn't expect. Nate was called. He stood slowly, clearly rehearsed, voice low and deferential. He admitted to taking some liberties with the trust, claimed it was to stabilize his business, said he intended to pay it back. He didn't apologize, not really, just tried to paint himself as a desperate man doing desperate things. Jess followed. Her lawyer tried to paint her as unaware, misinformed. She cried, dabbed at tears that didn't leave a trace on her cheeks. Said she didn't know the trust wasn't supposed to be used that way. Her voice cracked when she said Clara never told me it bothered her. That was when I laughed. Just once. Quietly. The judge didn't scold me. He didn't need to. The silence that followed said everything. My mother was last. She declined to testify. Her attorney said she was emotionally unwell and unfit to engage. That, more than anything, told the truth. When the judge called for a recess before final deliberation, I stepped into the hallway. Daniel was waiting outside, leaning against the wall with a coffee. He handed it to me without a word. They're scared, he said, nodding toward the courtroom door. They should be. I sipped the coffee still hot. I didn't come for revenge. I know, he said, but sometimes justice looks a lot like it. We sat together in silence, watching the clock tick. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Grace. A picture of Ava and Leo in pajamas, building a blanket fort, smiles wide, cheeks flushed. Underneath, we're cheering for you. Back in court, the judge didn't draw it out. His voice was steady, his ruling clear. The trust would be dissolved. A third-party administrator would oversee any remaining assets. The forged documents would be referred to the state attorney's office. My name would be legally disassociated from all accounts, and I was awarded compensation for damages, monetary and reputational. The room didn't erupt. It deflated, like someone had opened a valve on years of pressure and finally let it out. As I gathered my things, I glanced toward the other side. Jess was crying into her hands. Nate stared at the table like it had betrayed him. My mother, still silent, finally looked at me. Not with hatred, not even with anger, with fear, real quiet fear, not of me, of what she no longer controlled. And for the first time in my life, I didn't flinch. Outside, the cold bit my cheeks as I stepped into the sunlight. I pulled out my phone and called Grace. On my way, I said. How'd it go? I smiled, exactly how it was supposed to. I drove home with the windows slightly cracked, letting the winter air sweep through the car, clearing out the stale courtroom air and years of swallowed words. When I walked into Grace's house, Ava ran to me with arms wide, Leo right behind her. You win, he asked. I picked him up and kissed his cheek. We did. We spent the evening under the blanket fort, eating mac and cheese, watching animated movies with the volume too high. And when they finally drifted off, curled on either side of me, I sat there in the quiet and let the peace wash over me. Not triumph. Peace. That's what they never understood. I wasn't chasing victory. I was chasing stillness. A life where my children didn't grow up believing love meant owing people your silence. I was no longer the family's backbone, their emergency exit, their insurance policy. I was a mother, a woman, a name they would no longer use when it suited them. And the silence, it belonged to me now. It came 2 weeks after the verdict. A voicemail. Just 32 seconds long. No caller ID. Just that vaguely familiar static hum of a blocked number. I almost didn't listen to it. But something, curiosity maybe, or the last thread of duty I hadn't quite snipped, made me tap play. It was Mom. Her voice didn't sound like it used to. Not sharp, not sugary, not lined with the usual silk-wrapped judgment. It was flat, like the wind had knocked the walls out of her. "Clara, I don't know what to say anymore. I guess you got what you wanted, but I hope you know families survive worse. You didn't have to burn it all down." Click. No goodbye, no apology, just that old familiar trick, dressing up guilt and calling it love. I didn't call her back. Not because I hated her. That emotion had long since dissolved. What remained was something colder, heavier, and far more honest detachment. The kind that comes after years of trying to win a game where the rules kept changing. I wasn't angry. I was done. March rolled in like a thaw. Gray skies, cracked open sunlight, trickled through like something sacred, and the world felt less hostile somehow. I used my court-awarded settlement, not the whole amount, just a small piece to move. Not far, just enough to start fresh. A 2-bedroom rental in a quiet neighborhood, a small backyard, a patch of garden space. Nothing extravagant. Just enough to exhale. I bought a dining table. Not a hand-me-down. Not one someone else picked out for me. A solid walnut piece from a local carpenter, warm and heavy. The kind of table you sit at when you're making decisions about your life. I let Ava and Leo paint the legs, each corner a different shade. It clashed horribly, but every time I walked past it, I smiled. Because it was ours. No pretense, no performance, just something real. One afternoon, I got a call from Erica. "Clara," she said, voice light for once, "you're free and clear. All accounts resolved, no further action required. Congratulations." I thanked her, hung up, then just sat there for a while, staring at nothing in particular. It's a strange thing when weight leaves your shoulders. You expect to feel light, almost euphoric, but what you really feel is quiet. Like the absence of pain after years of pressure is its own kind of miracle. A week later, Daniel stopped by. He brought cookies, homemade ones, that looked like they'd melted in the oven. He handed me a USB. "What's this?" I asked. "The documentary," he said, grinning. "Or what's left of it." I raised an eyebrow. "I deleted everything that flattered them," he said. "Kept the real stuff, the parts that told the truth. Thought maybe Ava and Leo would want to see it someday. Not to hurt them, but so they understand what you came from, what you chose not to pass down." We sat at the painted table. Leo climbed into his lap like they'd known each other forever. Ava pulled out the cookies and rated them 6.5, but bonus points for trying, and Daniel took it like a champ. He didn't stay long. Just enough time to see that we were okay. That I was okay. And I was. The biggest changes were the quiet ones. No more waiting for the phone to ring with someone else's emergency. No more calendar invites I dreaded. No more gaslighting group texts pretending things were fine, asking for favors with a smiley face at the end like that erased years of damage. Instead, my time was mine. We had waffle Wednesdays, dance parties in the kitchen, movie nights with popcorn that always burned slightly. Leo learned to ride his bike in the driveway. Ava joined a school choir and sang like no one had ever tried to silence her. The silence in our home was different now, not the kind that follows rejection, the kind that follows peace. Every now and then, I'd get a pang. Not regret, just grief. Because walking away doesn't mean you didn't love them. It just means you loved yourself enough to stop dying for their approval. I didn't miss the chaos. I missed the version of them I used to hope they'd become. But I learned not to live in that hope. Because people don't change for you. They change if they want to. And they didn't. In May, I got a letter. A real one. Handwritten. From Jess. It wasn't long. 2 pages. She said she'd started therapy. Said she'd replayed that Thanksgiving over and over and saw it now how cruel it was. How complicit she was. How easy it had been to make me the villain when I was just the one who finally said no. She ended it with, "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to say it." I folded the letter, tucked it into a drawer I labeled "Not Yet." Because healing doesn't come with deadlines. And forgiveness, real forgiveness, isn't an event. It's a process, one you walk towards slowly, only if it still feels right when you get close. But I appreciated the letter, because she finally said what none of them ever had. "You were right." June came, warm air, fireflies, a birthday cake for Ava with mismatched candles and frosting fingerprints. She blew them out and said, "I'm glad we have our own house. Grandma's house was always so serious." I didn't say anything, just nodded, because she was right. I never thought I'd be someone who rebuilt. I thought I'd always be someone who endured. But somewhere between that slammed door on Thanksgiving and that courtroom silence, something shifted. I stopped surviving and started living. Not dramatically. Not with fireworks or viral speeches, just with choices. Small, steady, sacred choices. To rest, to protect, to walk away, to start again. Sometimes people ask me if I ever hear from them. Not really. Occasional forwarded notices about estate things I've long since signed away. A birthday card for Ava that arrived 6 weeks late with no return address. A friend of a friend saying Nate moved to Arizona. Jess apparently got a job in another city, started over. Good. Let them. Let everyone start again. That's what life is for. This is the part of the story no one ever films. The aftermath. The rebuilding. The Tuesday afternoons when nothing dramatic happens. The breakfasts where no one cries. The silence after the storm where you finally realize the storm wasn't weather. It was them. And now that they are gone, the sky feels permanent again. I didn't get the ending I imagined all those years ago. I got something better. A different beginning. At my own table. With seats I choose. And a door that only closes when I say it does.